Hello, and welcome to this webinar, utilizing the federal child nutrition programs to respond to COVID-19 this summer and next school year, co-hosted by the Food Research and Action Center, FRAC, and the National Conference of State Legislatures. I am Nomi Small, FRAC's Communications Associate. Before we begin, I want to cover some housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, and we will send the slides and recording in a follow-up email. After all the panelists have made their remarks, there will be time for questions and answers. To ask a question, please use the Q&A function on the right side of the WebEx screen. With that, I will pass it off to Sean Walsh, Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellow, working on NSCL's Hunger Partnership and Immigration Task Force. Thank you.
Thank you, Nomi. Hello, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Utilizing the Federal Child Nutrition Programs to Respond to COVID-19 this summer and next school year, that has been jointly organized by the Food Research and Action Center and the National Conference of State Legislatures Hunger Partnership. My name is Sean Walsh, and I am the Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellow working with the National Conference of State Legislatures Hunger Partnership. I will be providing you with an introduction to today's discussion and outlining our panel of speakers and agenda before handing things off to the child nutrition experts. Today's call is tailored to an audience of state legislatures and their staff. However, this webinar is open to a wider audience, so I want to provide a brief introduction to NCSL and the work of the Hunger Partnership. Next slide, please. NCSL is a bipartisan organization founded in 1975 that represents the legislatures in the states, territories, and commonwealths of the United States. Its mission is to advance the effectiveness, independence, and integrity of legislatures and to foster interstate cooperation and facilitate the exchange of information among legislatures. NCSL also represents legislatures in dealing with the federal government and is committed to improving the operations and management of state legislatures. Next slide, please. With that in mind, NCSL's Hunger Partnership was created to foster interstate cooperation and facilitate the exchange of information among state legislators who are anti-hunger champions. The Hunger Partnership connects public and private sectors to improve the availability of healthy food for hungry families and brings together legislators, their staff, and businesses to identify policies and programs to reduce hunger in America. State legislators play a vital role in ending hunger in the United States. They oversee the administration of federal programs, regulate and fund state programs, and convene otherwise disconnected partners to promote effective programs and encourage participation in anti-hunger efforts. Because of this important role state legislators play, the Hunger Partnership and FRAC wanted to share tailored information and a national level perspective on where things currently stand in ensuring all children across the country have access to the food they need to thrive given the rapidly shifting child nutrition policy landscape spurred by coronavirus. Next slide, please. Over the last few months, many aspects of normal life have been upended, leaving parents and caregivers unemployed and schools shuttered. Federal child nutrition programs have adapted and are continuing to adapt to meet the needs of America's families. In a nationwide response, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Congress have taken steps to ensure that hungry kids don't miss out on the meals they would otherwise receive in school. This spring, Congress enacted multiple pieces of legislation, including the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and the CARES Act, that together provided billions of dollars of additional funding for federal child nutrition programs and have created entirely new efforts, such as the Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer Program. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has also taken action by providing waivers for components of federal child nutrition programs and extending deadlines for school districts to apply for programs like the Community Eligibility provision. Even with these efforts, though, there is still work needed to ensure no child goes hungry. Many questions remain about how summer meals programs will continue to operate this summer, and many states and districts are continuing to figure out how classes and school meals will resume this coming school year. With that, we will be hearing first from another Emerson Hunger Fellow, Marie Knoll, working on the child nutrition team at FRAC, about the newly implemented Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer Program. Then we will hear from Clarissa Hayes, Senior Policy Analyst at FRAC, and Brian Weir, of Operation Food Search in St. Louis, Missouri, for a national and local perspective on summer meals and looking forward into next school year. Lastly, we'll hear from Etienne Philbin, a senior policy analyst at FRAC, about changes to the community eligibility provision for this coming school year. At the end, there will be time for questions. With that, I'll hand things over to Anne-Marie to learn more about PEBT.
Thanks, Sean. I really appreciate it. Hey, y'all. Thank you for joining us today. As mentioned, my name is Marie Knoll, and I'm the Bill Emerson Hunger Fellow on the Child Nutrition Team here at the Food Research and Action Center, sometimes known as FRAC. FRAC is an anti-hunger organization based in Washington, D.C., working to ensure access to child nutrition programs nationwide. For some context, I joined FRAC as a fellow in March, and 1 week later, I was in quarantine working from home. At the same time, schools across the nation were shuttering their doors. While advocates, lawmakers, and schools did an incredible job providing school meals to students, it simply wasn't reaching the same level of student school food programs as school breakfast and national school lunch programs normally do. This unprecedented experience needed a creative, effective solution. In response, a new program was created called Pandemic EBT, as Sean mentioned before. Much of my time at FRAC has been spent tracking the development of this program. Next slide, please. So what is PEBT? Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer, or PEBT, was created by Congress through the Families First Act in March of this year. PEBT was designed to provide nutrition resources to families to replace the school meals they typically receive when school is open. Families are provided an EBT card to purchase food at retailers that accept SNAP. An EBT card works like a debit card that can be used on food purchases and authorized food retailers. Next slide, please. So who is eligible for PEBT? Eligible children include all those that are certified to receive free and reduced price meals. Children who attend schools that offer free meals to all students through programs such as Community Eligibility or Provision 2, as well as students whose family have become eligible due to the crisis, which we refer to as newly eligible families. Next slide, please. So the value of the PEBT card. PEBT benefits are based on the value of free breakfast and lunch that students would be receiving on a day-to-day basis if they were in school. Since the basis of this program is to replace school meals, the value equates to about $5.70 per day for each child. For 4 weeks, that's approximately $114. These benefits can add up and provide much needed support to families. States can issue benefits retroactive to the day schools closed in the state. On this page, you'll see an example of 2 PEBT cards, one from Michigan and one from Delaware. Many states are adding the amount to existing SNAP EBT cards for families with school-age children and will not have separate EBT cards. An example of a SNAP EBT card is the Bridge card for Michigan, since many states have different names for their cards in the state. The one in Michigan is called the Bridge card, and you can see an example of that on your screen. For families not enrolled in SNAP, they will receive an entirely new PEBT card that looks similar to the examples on this slide. Next slide, please. So, for states to provide PEBT benefits to households, the state SNAP and child nutrition agencies must submit a joint plan to USDA that describes how they will operate PEBT. USDA has issued PEBT guidance and Q&A on developing plans that have been really helpful in this process. In their plan, states must outline how they will provide PEBT benefits to both SNAP and non-SNAP households, anticipated implementation dates, as well as a communications plan to ensure that families know about this program. Next slide, please. So this is one of my favorite resources that FRAC has right now on PEBT. As of today, 45 states, the District of Columbia, and the Virgin Islands have approved PEBT plans, which you can see reflected in this map in blue, and are in the process of implementing the program. Nevada, Oklahoma, Montana, Idaho, and Utah are the 5 states that do not have an approved plan at this time. The map can be found, this map on the page can be found on FRAC's PEBT website, which each state on the map contains a link to their specific state PBT website, which is really helpful. And each of those sites has details about how the program works, frequently asked questions, and generally a customer service line, which is very helpful. On this map, you'll see some of the states are light blue, and that means that they currently do not have a website, but this map is continually updated as information is available. Really, really wonderful. So if you go to the next slide, that'd be helpful. So I just was talking about FRAC's PBT website. Here at FRAC, we've created a PBT website that has important resources to further understand this program and what is happening in each state. On the web page, you can find the link at the top, frac.org/PBT. You'll find the latest list of approved states updated as approvals roll in, and a PBT frequently asked questions that address overall PBT questions. These can also serve as a template as states form their own state-specific FAQs. As well, FRAC has compiled a PBT communications toolkit with sample letters to families, sample and compiled PBT, and robo-text, and sample Q&As. This is in a shareable folder and is really helpful to be able to see really wonderful examples across the U.S. On this slide, you'll see an example of a PBT flyer. This flyer is in Spanish and is in Massachusetts, and it really helped to inform the families about what the program is, since it's an entirely new program. There, you'll also see the sample FAQ that FRAC has put out and is on the web page when you click on it. And there's also a sample infographic on this slide that you can see that can be used on platforms like Twitter or Facebook that really help draw people to the website to find more information. I encourage you to work with state partners to get out the word about PBT in your state. We are working with advocates from across the country and connect you with resources to share how families can access PBT in your state. Next slide, please. What is the future of pandemic PBT? Currently, FRAC and partners are working to extend and improve PBT. These improvements include expanding PBT through the summer and if school is close to another outbreak, extending PBT to children who would have otherwise received meals through child care, extending access to newly eligible families who have been economically impacted by the pandemic and have become newly eligible for benefits, and making sure that families that participate in SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid easily receive benefits and do not fall through the cracks. Providing funding for the state's administrative costs of operating the program is also an essential tool that we want to ensure in the future. And we want to make sure that PBT runs through 2021. PBT is a vital program that has risen to meet the needs of many children who rely on school meals during the school year. We want to ensure that it reaches all children who qualify. Thank y'all for y'all's attention. And just as a reminder, we have time for questions at the end of the presentation. Now, Clarissa Hayes, a senior policy analyst at FRAC, is going to be discussing summer meals and what schools are planning around the next school year. Clarissa?
Great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We know that everyone is super, super busy, and we really appreciate your interest in today's webinar. So like Anne-Marie mentioned, I'm going to speak about what's happening across the country in terms of access to the federally funded summer meal programs during this time, because we do know, like everything, it looks very different. And then we're going to spend some time talking about back to school and what we know is happening in different states. So before I dive in, I wanted to just give a quick overview or maybe a refresher of the summer nutrition programs in case you are unfamiliar with them. So these programs do operate every summer, and PEBT at the time is a really important complement to it. So families can utilize both of those during this time. I just wanted to make sure that was clear before I dive in. So these programs are really critical because we know that research shows that food insecurity, obesity, and summer learning loss all spike during the summer months. And we know that especially now with COVID-19, food insecurity is going to increase. So expanding access to summer meals is more critical than ever. So the easiest way to think about summer meal programs is really as an extension or a replacement of the school breakfast and lunch programs that exist during the school year. So as I mentioned, these fill a really important gap in rural, urban, and suburban areas by providing healthy meals to kids, but also oftentimes alongside enrichment and programs as well. So like the school meals programs, these are federally funded by USDA. They provide free meals and snacks to children 18 and under at sites in low-income communities or those that serve primarily low-income children. So I mentioned earlier that these programs typically operate during the summer months, but many programs have actually started earlier because of COVID-19 and different requirements, which I will touch on a later slide. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that these sites can serve up to 2 meals a day and that there is flexibility to when those can be served. And then all meals must meet USDA nutrition standards. So to be eligible, sites have to show that at least half of the children in the attendance area of the site qualify for free or reduced price meals, which can be done either through school data or through census data. So that's an overview of the program. We do know that despite their many benefits, the summer nutrition programs are underutilized. Last summer, for example, summer meals were reaching only 1 child for every 7 that received a school lunch during the school year. And to address this, many states have made summer meals a priority and have launched awareness and expansion campaigns to increase participation. The really great thing about this program is that meal sites, once they are in an eligible area, really can be anywhere. So they can be schools, they can be at parks, libraries, community centers, really wherever children congregate and gather during the summer months. Next slide, please. All right, so while that was a brief look at summer meal programs during a normal time, we know that this summer looks very different than years past, and I've actually had to stop using the word unprecedented because that word is really not unprecedented anymore. So I mentioned this briefly earlier, but many summer programs have actually been operating since March when schools closed because USDA, during unanticipated school closures, programs can come on and utilize the summer meal programs. So this means that schools and community sponsors actually stopped their typical meal service for the most part. For example, the school was doing school breakfast and school lunch. Many of them switched over to summer food because those are the programs that USDA makes available during that time. So recognizing that children cannot congregate or eat together in the typical fashion, USDA actually issued many program waivers and flexibilities over the past few months in March, which made it easier for programs to serve meals safely as communities responded to the pandemic. So many of these waivers were typically meant to expire at the end of the traditional school year, but there have been extensions of them because we know that for the most part, social distancing policies are still recommended, and summer camps and summer programming, just really a return to that really wasn't possible on the same scale. So we did work with state advocates and state groups and national partners to extend these waivers, which I'll touch on in just a second, but we just really, we commend USDA for doing so because we know it was the difference between being able to operate this summer or to have to close down. So we do have these waivers detailed at length on our website, but some of the big ones that have been extended are detailed here on the right side of the slide. And these are, for the most part, except for the meal pattern one, which I will touch on, these are available through August 31st. So we know that all of these flexibilities are an option for summer programs this year. So how does the summer food program look different? For one, instead of having to gather at a site, meals can actually be taken home. So that's a big one because usually congregate feeding is the main requirement for these programs. The next one that was big and was actually just extended is the one that allows meals to be served in non-eligible areas. So I talked about that 50% threshold. That has been waived. They did have to put in a request, and there are different requirements. For the most part, there is flexibility in where meal sites can be operated. Next, parents and guardians can pick up the meals without children being present. We know that that was a big concern around safety when this all started happening, so that flexibility has been extended through the summer, which we're really excited about. To make it easier for families, instead of having to come back to a site every day, multiple days worth of meals can actually be distributed at one time. So families can come, say, on a Monday and a Wednesday and then pick up a couple days of meals. So we know that makes it easier for them, especially travel-wise. And then the last one that we were really excited about, and it's getting extended on a month-to-month basis, is the one that allows for flexibility in meeting the meal pattern requirements. So we know that in some communities there is a disruption in the food that they can get, and every meal has to meet a meal pattern standard. So USDA is allowing some flexibility, although they do have to apply for that. So those are the waivers, and that is how summer is looking a little bit different this year. But I wanted to briefly touch on what legislators can do this summer to ensure that we are reaching every child who is eligible. So like I mentioned earlier, we know that the impact of COVID on food insecurity is going to rise. So it's really important that we ensure every family can access the summer meal site this summer and then also beyond. So the big one that I wanted to mention is increasing awareness of open meal sites. We always hear that lack of awareness is one of the biggest barriers to participation, and I know that that's also the case this summer where things are so different, rules are different, sites are different, so there is a little bit of confusion around the summer meals program. So I think anything that we can do to clear that confusion up and to connect families to meal sites is really critical. USDA actually launched a map, Meals for Kids, which I have linked here, but if you type in Meals for Kids, it comes up. And what this does is you can actually put in your address and you can find the meal site closest to you. There are also texting campaigns that states and USDA have. I can add that to the chat box. But same kind of idea. You can put in your address and find the site nearest to you. The next thing that I think we can do is to make sure that every state is utilizing the waivers and maximizing those. So I went over the waivers. For the most part, they do apply to every state. But states do have to opt in, and then they also need to implement them and make sure that sponsors are able to utilize them. So I would highly recommend this link here will take you to where your state is listed, and you can see the waivers and the flexibilities that your state has applied for. And if you do see that there's one that your state hasn't used or isn't using, there's a really important opportunity to make sure that that happens. And then the last thing that I will mention before I queue up our next speaker is just to really think about future opportunities for expansion. We know that the need really grew this summer. We know that the need will continue to grow through the next school year and into next summer. So states have really taken up innovative things to do around legislation and campaigns to increase participation. For example, over 10 states have actually passed legislation that requires high poverty schools to serve during the summer months, which we know can be key to increasing participation. We also know that some states have allocated state funding to support summer meals. So if sponsors need a grant for startup reasons or for equipment, they're able to apply and use that. So we thought that that was a really great example to share. And then I kind of hinted at this earlier, but we also know that many states have just prioritized summer by creating a state working group where you can set benchmarks and goals. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to highlight here. Next slide, please. And then I would just say before I turn it over to Brian, you know, with these waivers and with these flexibilities, we are seeing some really innovative and great programs. So we're seeing grab and go, delivery to homes. You know, even though meals are being sent home, there are those that are providing summer learning opportunities or maybe attaching it to an additional food drop or partnering with community orgs to promote programs. So there are always different ways to make those connections and to ensure that families keep coming back to meal sites. So with that, we really wanted to highlight a program in action because I think I could talk for forever, but I think who you really want to hear from is a program that's on the ground running this. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to a great colleague of mine, Brian Weir of Operation Food Search. He has over 20 years of experience in implementing the nutrition programs. We have worked together many times over the past couple of years, and he does amazing things at Operation Food Search in Missouri. So I'm going to turn it over to him to let him talk about his program, how it's looked normally, and then how it has evolved during this time. So Brian, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm hoping everybody can hear me there. And so yeah, we are Operation Food Search is a hunger relief organization in St. Louis, Missouri, which is a fancy word for a food bank. So we do all kinds of services here. And a few of the highlights right now, normal times, we serve about 200,000 people a month through our partner agencies, and they're in 15 counties in Missouri and about 15 counties in Illinois and St. Louis City as well. But I'm going to focus mostly on how we've transitioned a bit, during this pandemic time since March. While we still have our overall mission in doing what we do, we really, really had to pivot and do things differently. We've seen food insecurity rates increase dramatically in our region with all the layoffs and people actually attempting to find food at their local food pantry or distribution that have never had to do it before. So it's a confusing time for people as well. So we've expanded our partnerships and formed new ones in order to develop some new food distribution channels. And we've developed a bunch of resource materials, which I'll get to towards the end of my talk here, that are on our website at operationfoodsearch.org. And that is available for everybody. We've got some great downloadable materials and actually some that you can order in print. And we have most of our things now translated into 6 different languages. So it's really neat to be able to get all that out there. But I do manage a child nutrition team and a nutrition education team here at Operation Food Search. So we do programs like this year-round. The Summer Food Service Program, this is our 9th summer. We also have the After-School Meals Program, the At-Risk CACFP. We have a full nutrition education team. I've got 2 registered dietitians on staff, and another one is getting ready to sit for their exam. And we also do what we call Operation Backpack, which is a food assistance program for kids at the elementary level, throughout the school year. So if you want to jump to the next slide, please. Summer meals. The way we traditionally do summer meals is exactly how Clarissa said earlier. We partner with people on the outside. We are a sponsor. So Operation Food Search does not actually serve most of our meals. We don't provide the programming. We don't have the structured STEM activities. We rely on our partnerships to do that. And we provide the food and all the administration for the programs, whereas the program partners can use their money and their expertise doing what they do best. So it's a great partnership that we've formed over the years with many of our local organizations. And everything that Clarissa said earlier is people who we partner with: youth camps, churches, summer schools, libraries is one of our biggest partners, the St. Louis County Library System. The St. Charles County Library System and the St. Louis City Library System is 3 of our biggest partners, and it works out great. But this year we had to pivot. We had to change because of the rules. The rules with congregate feeding is, we find children where they congregate at all of those places that have been discussed. Well, this year they're congregating at home. They were all told to stay home. So we don't go to pools. We don't go to parks. We don't go to community centers because most of them are frankly closed and just now beginning to open with some limited rules for, capacity and things like that. So we've been adapting as well. The USDA waivers that were just mentioned have been instrumental in our success in order to keep these programs going. We definitely feared in the beginning, how is this going to work for the summertime? So the USDA really did step up, and I will commend them for that. And I'm usually sometimes a detractor on some of the rules, and I've had my conversations with everybody too. But it's great to have these open discussions, and they are really, really stepping up nationally, so it's been fantastic. We started this program back on March 25th when schools started closing in the St. Louis area. A lot didn't come back from spring break. When we first started, we didn't know exactly what to do. How were we going to pivot? Where were we going to go? So we leaned in with our library system, who also closed and decided to send all their staff home. So we had a big meeting. We decided, let's come up with a drive-through method. So we started drive-throughs at 10 different county libraries because they had big parking lots and they had staff. So they recalled their staff. I got my staff going. We brought in additional staff to pack meals. And we're doing distributions 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at those 10 different locations through March and April and May. And the reason we did 3 days a week was to less interaction. And of course, with the USDA waivers, we were able to do multiple meals, multiple days worth of meals at one time. So on Monday, a family can come up and get a pack that has 2 breakfasts and 2 lunches. Same thing on Wednesday, same thing on Friday. And that way we're actually just, sending out meals for 6 days a week. So that worked out really well. And as we transitioned into summer, into June, we kept that going and just added. So believe it or not, we have increased our reach, and we are adding locations and expanding our program in the world of COVID-19. So we're doing grab-and-go meals with a lot of our partners that don't have programming but still wanted to provide food to the communities. So there it's kind of a walk-up method versus a drive-through pickup. We have 2 rural partnerships that are outside the St. Louis City, St. Louis County proper. They're pretty far from here. One's a big food pantry. And last summer, we tried to work with them for the first time ever, and we were serving about, it may have been 40 or 50 meals a week down there because one was congregate feeding. The kids had to come, the parents had to drive them in to the food pantry, sit down, eat, not leave, be monitored. This year, that has all changed, and we're also serving Monday, Wednesday, and Friday there, and we're serving about 200 meal packs, so it's 400 meals per day now at that location. It's just incredible. Our other locations right now, just to give some perspective, we normally serve about 100,000 summer meals in the summertime. We have a fairly large program. As of today, I will have, since we started March, April, May, and almost through June, I'll be surpassing 300,000 meals this afternoon. So it's been quite the uptake, and it's because one reason summer schools aren't in session. If they are, it's virtual. So we're into the community doing our community work. And the fourth thing we do is a mobile meals route. We have our own vans and our own staff that goes into communities and provides meals where children can't get out. They can't get to the traditional other places, so we go in there. And one of the big partners there is the St. Louis Housing Authority. So it's been working out very, very well there as well. The next slide kind of gives you, if you want to switch, that's an indication of what that looks like. We have the vans behind there. We pop up a tent. We throw up some tables. We've got some cones to try to keep people spaced out. And I've got 6 people that work each one of my vans. And I've got 2 of them right now this summer that stop at 6 different locations throughout the day. So it's a really neat program, and it really helps us with our outreach and get everything into the communities the best that we can. The next slide is our homepage on our website. And I've got an arrow there that says Find Food on the top right. We also created a child meal map back in March because we were trying to figure out how many schools were still open. Are they going to continue child nutrition program? Will they do lunch? Will they do breakfast? So we have got about 600 locations on that map. And of course, the other maps, all the maps are great. And it's really nice to have one that's ours that we can monitor daily. So it's very, very helpful. We have many other resources on our website too. As like I was saying, we've got the COVID-19 resources. It's just underneath that arrow. And the big button in the middle is called Strengthening Our Future. It starts with our children and has all of our programs behind that. And of course, this is PowerPoint, so I'm not clicking through anything. But if you would, I would love it to go to our website and see what is there. One of the resources you can find on the next slide is a Family Food Finder flyer. We made these. It's a 2-sided flyer. It has 4 little spots in each one. How do you find a food pantry? How do you find a child meals location? How do you find out about SNAP? How do you find out about WIC? Then PEBT was coming around. And then how do you find a library where we're serving our sites? So all of these things are in there, and it's such a great flyer. It's been received very, very well that we got them out to our local hospitals and children's care centers, and the Pediatrics Association asked us to create one for the entire state of Missouri, which we did, and it's also available on another page on our website that's available to everybody. And the Stock Up for Summer Guide is part of the PEBT program. So with additional monies being put onto your EBT card, we're providing some resources on how to use that money, how to buy things, and it has a bunch of recipes in there too for easy cooking and easy things at home. And the last thing I'll leave you guys with, because like Clarissa mentioned, as she can, I can talk for days about child nutrition programming. And I enjoy talking for days about child nutrition programming, whether it's breakfast in the classroom, which I've worked on extensively, or these programs, here. What's next is the biggest concern because we're working right now in what we're doing. We're providing a lot of food. We're also participating in the Farm to Families Food Box program. St. Louis County provided us with $1.3 million in CARES Act funding to provide shelf-stable foods throughout the county to all ages. So we're providing a lot of food this summer, but we're already thinking about what's next, what's coming down the pike for school. School's gonna start in some fashion or another. Is it full days? Is it multiple 2 half days in the same day? Is it virtual? We don't have any idea. But we need to start thinking about that, and so we need to start potentially forming legislation around that. We need to start talking about waivers for that, specifically in the after-school meals program, or a potential extension of the summer food program, because what does after-school programming look like, and then the legislative restrictions that are with those programs for attendance and enrollment and things like that. So I'll leave it there with that, but I am already starting to ask these questions. I'm glad for this webinar today for others that start asking these questions because they need to be asked sooner than later because school is coming. And that third meal that we can provide after school is so beneficial and so essential to the children that we serve in our community. I would certainly hate for it to just disappear. So thank you for my time here, and I will kick it back to Clarissa. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you for all the great work that you guys continue to do at Operations Food Search. We really appreciate it. And that was a perfect segue to my slides. I think, Naomi, if you could go back a couple. And I would just say, too, before I move into looking ahead, I know that Brian shared examples of the great resources that they have for summer meals. And on some level, at every state, there are those similar materials, whether it's coming from the anti-hunger organization or the state agency. So an easy lift if you send out newsletters or share emails to people in your communities, sharing that information along with the map and the texting line, which I put in the chat box, is a really easy lift to make sure more families are aware of summer meals. Awesome. Well, I know that we want to leave time for community eligibility and to get to questions, so I will get through this pretty quickly. But like Brian mentioned, we at FRAC are also starting to look to the start of the school year. It's going to look very different, as I think has been the theme of this webinar, whether it be remote learning, school in session on alternate days, staggered by morning and afternoon. So the meals that go along with the school day are also going to look very different. So back in May, CDC actually released interim guidance for school administrators on things to consider with school going back to session. So overall, it does recommend that schools continue the meal programs and to come up with a plan if there is further spread to, promote the social distancing and to make sure that large groups aren't gathering. So one big takeaway from that is to make sure that meals were, instead of being eaten in the cafeteria, as is usually happening, to do it in the classroom, similar to breakfast in the classroom. So there will be some shifts in the upcoming school year. The other thing that we wanted to flag, in addition to the CDC guidance, is that in every state, they are releasing guidance that is, broadly on back to school, but for the most part, a lot of them do mention nutrition services because it is such a big part of what schools provide to families. So we have been tracking these plans, and at this time, I would say a majority of states do have these out. I did include a snapshot of Maryland's plan here, which is one of the first to come out and to be published, and it really does talk about the importance of school meals and, in the conversations about back to school, who should be involved. And they mentioned the school nutrition staff should be part of that conversation. They talk about safety procedures for the cafeteria, the feasibility of moving to other meal service models, and other things that schools should be thinking about because, states may be putting out this guidance, but when it comes down to it, the districts themselves will be able to take what makes sense and to make it work for them. So it is going to look very different. The next slide, please. So although these state plans do look very different, like I mentioned, most of them do include meal service, which is very exciting. And I wanted to just touch on a couple things that we're seeing from these state plans. So like I mentioned earlier, a big part of it is just really taking the meals out of the cafeteria and doing it or serving them in the classroom or even outside if possible. I think that might be for our southern states. So they mentioned, having in the morning order sheets delivered to the classroom where students can choose what they'd like to have for lunch and doing it that way. Instead of having self-service, meals would be individually wrapped and then served. And then if they do continue to use the cafeteria, making small changes like having staggered times, keeping tables farther apart, and then even, making clear marked lines on the floor of ways to enter and leave the cafeteria just to promote safety. And then the last thing that I would say that a lot of plans have that we are excited about is that they mention if schools do have to close again, having a plan in place to serve meals like they did in the spring when schools closed originally. So like we've been mentioning, there are a lot of things to think about when considering schools reopening, but meals really need to be an important part of that conversation. So we wanted to leave everybody with a few things to think about. So the number one thing would definitely be to review your state plan. I'm sure many of you already have done that, but making sure that meals are included and a big part of that conversation, even in the event of remote learning. The other thing that I would mention, just in conversations with school districts, they are talking about the need for equipment, staffing will look different, so reaching out to the school districts in your state to see what do they need to implement this new model, what are they thinking about. I know Brian mentioned the after-school meal program. We know that after-school programs really took a hit in the spring when they had to close down. Many of them are still closed. The summer programming isn't really happening in the same way. So if there is a way to support funding for after-school programs to get back up and running, that's another consideration for your state. I went over the waivers earlier. We know that some flexibility is going to be needed for the fall because, like I mentioned, school may be in session one day and then off the next, or off for a week and then on for a week. So we know that some type of grab and go or remote feeding program is going to be needed. So as a legislator, that can be something that you track. We will be putting out materials and resources and keeping things updated on our website. So feel free to check out RAS.org to learn more as we learn more. And then the last thing that I would say before I turn it over to my colleague ATN to really dive into community eligibility is make sure that if you haven't already, you connect with your state anti-hunger organization. Every state has one. They are really great asset. They are tracking this information, working with schools, so they can really be a great partner as we move forward and try to make sure that every kid has access to school meals in the fall. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to ATN to dive into an opportunity to support children's nutrition needs through this program when schools reopen. So ATN?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Clarissa. That was great. It's great to hear about all the work that's been happening in Missouri and across the country over the past few months and the opportunities moving forward to ensure that we are serving kids. I now want to take a little bit of time to discuss another important waiver and opportunity we have this coming year to support students and their families. Next slide. Community eligibility. If you don't know what community eligibility is, it's a provision that allows high poverty schools across the country to offer breakfast and lunch at no charge to all students while eliminating the traditional school meal application process. So schools are reimbursed based on the proportion of low-income children in the school or district. Eligibility and reimbursement is based on the percentage of identified students, better known as an ISP. And these identified students are children who are certified for free meals without a school meal application, such as kids whose families participate in SNAP or TANF, so they've already completed an application that determines their eligibility, as well as children who are homeless, migrant, enrolled in Head Start, or in foster care. Any school or district can adopt community eligibility if at least one of its schools has an ISP of 40% or more. And districts can implement community eligibility in one school, a group of schools, or district-wide. So there are many different options to adopt community eligibility with school districts and just to see who is eligible. Next slide. So community eligibility is often a smart choice for eligible schools, and the numbers really show it. Participation has only increased since the program became available in the 2014-2015 school year. And here are just a few of the documented benefits of community eligibility. It lessens administrative work. Like I said, schools no longer have to collect or verify school meal applications and can focus on feeding kids. It's also proven to help increase participation in the program. Participating schools in pilot states increase breakfast participation by 10% and lunch participation by 5%, according to a USDA study. I've also seen districts with much higher numbers as well. It also facilitates the implementation of innovative delivery models. These delivery models have been traditionally used to break down barriers to breakfast participation and to break down barriers to the school breakfast program and increase participation. And another reason why community eligibility might be more critical next school year is that many schools are thinking of utilizing these models to serve both breakfast and lunch when they reopen to avoid those large numbers of students gathering in the cafeteria. CEP also improves the financial viability of school nutrition programs. When participation increases, school districts can take advantage of economies of scale and reinvest additional revenue to improve nutrition quality and provide staff training. Also very important, as many school nutrition programs have seen quite a shift in the past few months since COVID, and so helping with that. And then finally, I know a big issue that has been in the press, I would say more so in the fall and in past years, not necessarily in the past few months, but it does eliminate the unpaid school meal fee issue altogether. So when schools adopt community eligibility, all students eat free of charge. So the school district doesn't have to collect unpaid meal fees. Next slide. So like I said, their CEP rolled out nationwide in the 2014-2015 school year, and we've seen an increase in the number of schools adopting community eligibility every year. This past school year, almost 15 million children were able to eat breakfast and lunch at no charge at school through community eligibility. And while this is a huge gain, over the past few years, there are a lot of schools that are eligible and not participating. And there are even more eligible schools given the impact of COVID and its impact on the economy. In our recent report that FRAC released in May, we look at eligible school districts and school participation in community eligibility by state. And some states have over 90% of eligible school districts participating, while others have only 15 to 20% of eligible school districts participating. And we know that there will be more eligible this year. We'll get into that in a bit, but I definitely encourage you to see where your state ranks and to think about what can be done to ensure that all eligible schools in your district are utilizing this option. So why do we have such a huge opportunity this year, and how does the financial crisis created by COVID link to community eligibility? So like I said, community eligibility is linked to SNAP participation earlier, and so due to lost jobs and wages, there is huge increases in SNAP participation. And so we really hope that more schools will take a fresh look at community eligibility in the next 2 months and re-examine if it's a financially viable option to help them meet their students' needs. Like I said, schools are reimbursed based on the proportion of low-income children in the school or district, including children certified for free meals without a school meal application. Between February and April of this year, SNAP participation increased by 13% in 21 states on average. Assuming an 11% increase in children participating in SNAP, a school's identified student percentage would grow from 50 to 55.5%. This jump would increase the percentage of meals being reimbursed at the free rate from 80 to 88.5%. These numbers do not include additional families who applied in May or will apply in June. It is important to note that the increase will be higher or lower based on your community, but as you can see, that this has huge implications for schools being able to adopt community eligibility. So for districts not participating in CEP, the ISP increase may make community eligibility a more financially viable option. Schools that were previously ineligible may now meet the required thresholds. School districts that have also been participating might see a higher rate in reimbursement and might be able to expand to more schools. Next slide. So due to the pandemic, USDA issued a number of waivers. Clarissa covered quite a few on school and summer, but I did want to flag that one of the other waivers is CEP, and the waiver extends the deadlines for community eligibility election this year. So this extension allows more school districts time to re-examine community eligibility, and schools now have until August 31st to decide if they would like to elect community eligibility for the next school year. Next slide. So we know that not everybody, I realized that I threw out a lot of stats on reimbursement and how this works, and please, you do not need to be an expert on community eligibility to advocate for it and getting into the details. We have the experts and resources for that. We just want to highlight this as a huge opportunity for schools, and can really, and we have developed the tools and resources to let the experts in the school district that need to evaluate the finances and how this works. And so to help them, you know, make their plan and assess if this is financially viable. And so encourage you to share these resources with school districts in your district. Next slide. So like I said, you know, we realize this is a huge opportunity, and we're really trying to get the word out. This year, we know that there are a lot of schools that CEP wasn't an option before this year. We also know there are a lot of schools that, you know, for one reason or another, they may have been eligible, but really trying to think through all the different options and potentially taking time to slowly implement that. Given the SNAP increases that we've seen over the past few months, this is really the time to elect community eligibility, because it also, while it will support families next year, this isn't just something that school districts elect 1 year at a time. It will provide free school meals to schools that adopt for 4 years. So they lock in that rate for 4 years. If the number of identified students goes down, they will continue to be reimbursed at the rate that's locked in this summer. So we encourage you to flag this as an opportunity for your school district leadership. Promote all these opportunities through social media. As you can see on the screen, we have a community eligibility database to see what, please take a look and see what school districts are currently participating in your state, which ones are eligible, and if you need help putting together that list of who to reach out to, we are happy to do that. But like I said, promoting community eligibility through social media and webinars, and really just trying to get the word out about all of these amazing programs and what can be done. I think it's sometimes, like I said, this hasn't been available. Many school districts might not have seen this as an option, and so reminding them of that, given everything that's going on. We know that lots of different plates are full. We also have a sample letter that you can send to superintendents that we'll include in the follow-up email, talking about all the benefits of community eligibility and highlighting the tools we have available to see if it's a right fit for them. So we'll send that all in follow-up resources, but definitely want to share and really hope to get the word out about this huge opportunity we have this summer to support families. With that, we can open it up to questions. And as you can see, there is a box in the right-hand corner of your screen, and you can just type there, and Anne-Marie can share with the panelists. I see we have 6 minutes left.
Great. Thank you, Etienne, and thanks to Clarissa and Brian and Sean. I know that was a lot of information, but really, really important information about child nutrition programs across the nation that serve millions and millions of students every day. So like Etienne said, we have a few minutes for questions. And the questions that we don't get to, we will send out some answers after in a follow-up email that also will contain this entire webinar. So one of the first questions we have, this one's for you, Clarissa. What can I do to make sure school districts and organizations continue to serve schools in my community?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think the place to start is to see what's happening in your community. So there are some really great ways to do that. I mentioned earlier the state anti-hunger organizations. We have a list of those on our website, so they have a really good grasp on what's happening in communities. And, you know, because schools did and have to close their doors in March and community partners were coming on, schools were continuing their meal service, there were some that, you know, had to hop off the program for whatever reason. So I know that that has been an effort in many states, is just to make sure that the programs continue, and if there is a barrier like, you know, lack of awareness, if volunteers or staffing are an issue, I think it's really important to kind of identify those issues. And for the most part, you know, the schools and the organizations that are serving now have served before in the past. And like Brian mentioned, the waivers are making it a little bit easier to operate. So another part of that, I think, would be to make sure that sponsors and schools are utilizing those and maximizing those so that it's a little bit easier for them to operate. And then I think, yeah, you know, connecting with the schools in your area, the community sponsors, seeing if there are any barriers and seeing how we can continue to support them through the rest of the summer.
Thank you, Clarissa. That's super helpful and really, really important to connect with your serving. Etienne, this question is for you. How do I find out what schools in my state are eligible for CEP but not participating currently?
So like I said in my comments, we do have a database that looks at we identify all those schools that are currently participating. We also capture all those that are eligible. The database is actually from last year, so we do know that there are many more schools that are eligible. And so we do have a state map that's generating those updated state lists and can share that with you. But if you're interested in who's eligible and not participating and who needs to reach out, who needs, you know, some pushing, we are definitely available to help create those lists.
And things that are constantly changing, but how will y'all maintain momentum through the rest of the summer with the programs that you have? And maybe what are some strategies for y'all doing this?
Oh, Anne-Marie, could you just repeat the first half of that question? I missed it. Thank you.
No worries. The mute function can be funny. So this question was for Brian. So I had just said that summer is changing. Things are a little wild. But how will y'all maintain momentum through the rest of the summer?
Gotcha. I missed the beginning of that too, so I didn't know it was for me. What we're going to do, we have quite the marketing arm here at Operation Food Search. We hit all the social media channels all the time. We have a great relationship with our local press, whether it's print press, radio press, or the news stations. I do interviews probably once a week or better with somebody, somewhere. So we send out press releases strategically. In the beginning, this is happening. We sent one out in June. Don't forget, summer's still here, even though summer school is different. Look for these locations. We'll do it again right after the 4th of July, and we'll do it again in August, because August is historically the month where all these programs just tank, because program providers get tired. They don't want to provide anymore. Their summer camp ends, you know, July 31st. But this year is just so different that we will just keep pushing the message out to anybody who wants to hear it, and just keep it going all the time.
Great. Thank you, Brian. I think what you're talking about is super important, constantly being in contact, making sure people know that these programs are still happening and available. for them. So we're approaching the 2 o'clock hour, and I really want to be respectful of all the folks on the call, the panelists, and all of the audience. Your time. I know that we all are working on a lot of things. So I want to thank Sean, Clarissa, Brian, and ATN today for sharing important information on these child nutrition programs. And all of you who took time out of your day to join the webinar. If you have any further questions or need assistance, the contact information is on the slide that's on your screen right now. We would be happy to help you with connecting you with folks or any questions you may have, any of the questions we didn't get to today. Thank you for your time today. Let's ensure children are able to continue to access these essential child nutrition programs. Thank you all for your work that you do every day, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful afternoon.